In this video, we're going to cover how fear of failure sabotages your performance as an athlete and one simple tip that you can use to manage this fear. Hey there, I'm Eli Straw, mental performance coach and the founder of SuccessStartsWithin.com. Fear of failure in sports involves this fear that you have over making mistakes. So there's a fear there's a fear present where you do not want to make mistakes. Because you don't want to make these mistakes, you end up holding yourself back and playing with a scared mind because you're focused on not wanting to mess up. Now, is it really the mess up itself or the mistake itself that you feel like you are afraid of? That's what's going to stand out in your mind, right? And that's the thing you are wanting to avoid. And we're going to talk more about avoidance here in a second. However, it's really the consequence. So the thing that will happen when you fail or when you make the mistake that you are actually trying to avoid and that you're actually afraid of. Whenever you are experiencing this fear, it's important for us to get clear on what these consequences are, because the consequences are where your focus is, right? So if your consequence is getting benched, for example, and that's what you're worried about, that's what you're afraid of, well, then naturally you'll be afraid of making mistakes, because if you make mistakes, then you feel like you could get benched. Now, when we see this fear, we're going to see this fear form for a few different reasons, and one of the main reasons is that you simply want to play well, so you don't want to make mistakes. And the idea of wanting to play well can very quickly shift into this focus on, okay, I don't want to mess up, because if I mess up, that means that I'm not playing well. But what we can also see happen is that past negative experiences drive fear of failure. If you've experienced something in the past where, maybe coaches yelled at you, or maybe you've made that mistake to lose your team the game, maybe you have gotten benched because you've made a mistake. If that's happened to you before and it was a negative experience for you, that can also cause you to experience fear moving forward. So what we're going to see is that we're going to see a past negative experience contribute to the fear of failure, but we also see this imagined or created future consequence that very, very well may be real, right? I mean, you might get benched or yelled at if you make a mistake, but we see this consequence that could happen or will happen if you make mistakes also drive this fear. Now, you do not have to have a previous negative experience in order to develop the fear of failure. I work with a lot of athletes who, just happen to be afraid of making mistakes, but they can't really pinpoint why. And, they haven't had these negative experiences before that would make it make sense for them. And that's fine, because we know that just because you haven't had a negative experience before does not mean that you can't imagine what one would feel like, or even think of one in your mind, or see your teammates or a friend or somebody else get yelled at or benched, or have some consequence happen that you then grow to be afraid of. So to help get clear on just how this fear sabotages your performance, I want to provide you with a case study. Now, this case study isn't based on any one athlete that I've worked with in particular, but it's just a case study that I've created based on a lot of principles and characteristics that I've seen in athletes who have been dealing with the fear of failure. For this case study, I'm going to use a guy's college basketball player. So this player is dealing with a lot of fear. So let's first examine how this fear is playing out during a game. So during a game, what's happening is that he's finding himself afraid of turning the ball over and afraid of missing shots. So he's a shooting guard, and when they are coming up the court, he's not bringing the ball up the court, but he's finding himself running to the corner and kind of hiding, to where he's not calling for the ball as much as he does during practice. He's not calling for the ball nearly as much as he does when he's just playing pickup with his teammates. So he's going to the corner and he's hiding. Now, when he does end up getting the ball, because naturally his teammates pass him the ball, he hesitates. And so when he's hesitating, he's not pulling the trigger quick enough to take shots. So then what ends up happening is that he hesitates, but then he still takes the shot, but the defender closes in. So sometimes he's getting blocked, but other times he's just having a contested shot, and so he's not as consistent with these shots because they're tougher shots at that point, right? So he had an open shot, but due to his hesitation, his shot is no longer open. Now, he's also experiencing this fear in terms of turning the ball over. So when he does get that ball passed to him and he hesitates, sometimes he tries to drive, but his dribbling is out of balance and out of rhythm right now because, once again, he's hesitating. He has fear on his mind, so he's not just focused as much on being in the rhythm and dribbling smoothly. So he ends up turning the ball over a lot more. So what we're seeing on the offensive side for this basketball player is that he's not calling for the ball quite as much, so he's hiding. When he does get the ball passed to him, he's hesitating, so when he does take a shot, he's not taking as high percentage of a shot. And then when it comes to dribbling and driving to the basket, he is dribbling in a hesitant way, and so he's not dribbling as well. And also, he's just not driving to the basket quite as much because he is scared of making mistakes. So now let's examine where this fear is actually coming from. So for this basketball player, about a year ago, he had a game where he missed a bunch of shots, he made some turnovers, and his coach yelled at him after the game. In front of his whole teammates, the coach yelled at him. So what we can see there is we can see a negative past experience where this basketball player experienced the very consequences that he is afraid of experiencing again. When he experienced these in the past, this led to him feeling an incredible amount of fear of having that happen again because it was very negative, it was embarrassing, and what ended up happening is that he saw his minutes decrease for the remainder of the season. So he lost his coach's trust. But then going into the offseason, he worked really hard. Going into fall practices at the beginning of the school year, he performed well in practice. However, he is seeing that fear carry over into this season, which is why he is finding himself hesitating on the court. So we do have a past experience with this basketball player feeding into the fear that he is experiencing right now. Now, when it comes to his focus going into games, this basketball player is focusing heavily on not wanting to mess up. And this is where we see the idea of avoidance come into play. So avoidance is at the core of fear of failure as well as performance anxiety. Because when you are afraid of making mistakes, so you don't want to make a mistake, naturally your mind will focus on how do I avoid mistakes. And do you remember how I said that this basketball player isn't calling for the ball quite as much? Well, if you're afraid of turning the ball over and you are afraid of taking bad shots and getting yelled at, what is the safest way to avoid that? Not calling for the ball. You might be out there, you could even play good defense, but you don't need the ball passed to you. Because if you get the ball passed to you, you have the opportunity to turn it over, miss a shot, just generally mess up, right? So if you don't call for the ball, you don't have to make a mistake. That's what he's experiencing because he's focused so much going into these games and during the game on not making mistakes. He is avoiding situations when he could make mistakes. Now, unfortunately, if he's not wanting the ball, right, so he's not calling for the ball, do you think he's in a really good position to make a quick decision and make a good play when he does get the ball passed to him? No. At that point, he is hesitating. And so this is where we see the avoidance, so not wanting the ball, actually affect his play when he does get the ball, simply because he is hesitating and now he is out of rhythm. He's not as quick as he needs to be, and he's not trusting his natural skills and his natural instincts. Now, over time, right, so game after game, if he's playing in this scared way, his confidence will continue to drop. Because as he plays in a hesitant way, as he doesn't call for the ball, he won't be scoring as many points. Because he's hesitating, right, both with his dribbling and with his shooting, we know that he's making more mistakes as a result of that. So now he's feeling more fear about making more mistakes because he is making mistakes. And this is where we see this fear feed on itself and become a self-fulfilling prophecy and a negative cycle. So that's how this fear is going to sabotage your game. We see this fear affect your focus. We see this fear affect your self-talk. And most importantly, we see this fear affect your physical play because when you are wanting to avoid mistakes, you hold yourself back. You hesitate. And just like the basketball player is hesitating with his shots and with dribbling and with driving to the basket, no matter what sport you play, you'll see that avoidance pattern take place within your game. So how could this basketball player and how can you manage this fear if you are experiencing it? Because we know fear sabotages your performance, and so we equally know that we need to do something to manage this fear. Well, the tip I have for you is you want to set controllable goals. If we examine that basketball player case study that I gave you, we see that everything he is experiencing in terms of changes with his physical play can be linked back to his focus. He is focusing on not wanting to make mistakes. He is thinking about all those negative experiences he has had in the past. He is thinking about what will happen if he does make these mistakes. His focus is on all these negative consequences, these negative experiences, and these negative emotions. If he can change his focus, bring his focus more into the present moment, he'll find himself playing in a more reactive way, which is a good type of reactive where he's just in the moment and he is reacting to what happens in the game instead of trying to over control his performance. And in order to be present, right, in order to focus in the moment, he needs something to focus on. That's where these controllable goals will come into play, and that's where they'll come into play for yourself. So what a controllable goal is it is something that is part of the process of your game that is 100% in your control, so you can make sure you do it no matter what, and it is simple. We do not want to create an overcomplicated goal, right? We want to keep it as simple as possible. So for the basketball player, what I would suggest for him is I would suggest that he focuses on the goal of making quick decisions, right? So that would be one, and also just giving full effort. I've admittedly seen a huge amount of success with the goal of just giving full effort because it's something physical, but it's also something that's more measurable than anything else, really. Because if you give full effort, I mean, you know at the end of the game when you say, okay, I gave full effort. And so for him, that might look like taking quicker shots. It might look like driving to the basket more. It might look like going after loose balls more. But giving full effort will give him something else to focus on instead of focusing on the fact that he doesn't want to make mistakes. Same thing with the idea of making quick decisions. If he just says that my goal today is to make quick decisions, it's not my goal today is to make the right decision, or even my goal today is to make perfect decisions. It's just to make quick decisions. So he's going to be focused on being quicker with his shooting, being quicker with deciding to drive to the basket. And then, another controllable goal that I would probably have him set. And by the way, I know I said keep these simple, so I would probably get him to focus on one of these each game, and then we would see which one works the best for him. But another controllable goal he could focus on is simply calling for the ball. So instead of basing his game on how many shots did I make or even take, it's just, focus on calling for the ball more. I know it's uncomfortable. I know it feels scary at that point, but you want to focus on calling for the ball. And that's a key part to these controllable goals. They won't feel comfortable and they won't feel safe for you. And the reason that they won't feel comfortable or safe is because the natural response that your mind is having in these moments is to avoid. We know that because you are afraid of what's going to happen. And when you are afraid of what will happen, naturally your mind wants to keep you safe. So you're wanting to avoid those situations. So, the basketball player hesitating, not calling for the ball, that feels safe in that moment because that's protecting him from the negative consequence that he wants to avoid. So calling for the ball, being more aggressive with driving to the basket, giving full effort, making quick decisions, those will all feel uncomfortable. But if we break it down and we really looked at what is the most competitive approach for him to have, what will actually lead to him performing well, giving full effort, calling for the ball more, making quick decisions, those are all leading to better performances, more so than not calling for the ball is keeping him safe. Because what we're actually seeing happen is not calling for the ball, even though it feels safe, is causing him to hesitate and leading to more mistakes for him. So for yourself, the way that you can take all this information, right, and apply it to your game is you want to be on the lookout for any of these consequences that you are afraid of, and you want to pay attention to these avoidance behaviors. And remember that any sort of fear you experience leads to you wanting to avoid the consequence of that fear, and in order to avoid that consequence, the safest and most natural reaction and response for your mind is to hold you back and to avoid. But we have to be careful because avoiding and holding yourself back only increases the chances of you making these mistakes. The way that you manage this is by setting controllable goals. They will not feel comfortable. They will not come easy, but you need to set simple and controllable goals for your game to keep your mind present and to keep you focused on what will actually help you perform your best. So in summary, the fear of failure in sports refers to you being afraid of making mistakes. When you are afraid of making mistakes, it's really the consequence of that mistake you are afraid of. When you are afraid of that consequence, the natural response for your mind is to avoid. So this is where you find yourself hesitating and playing it safe. And that is why fear of failure sabotages your performance. In order to manage this sabotage, you want to set controllable goals for yourself that keep your mind in the present moment and on the process parts of your game that you can control. The parts of your game that actually lead to the success that you want. If you're interested in learning more about one-on-one mental performance coaching or any of the sports psychology programs that I have available, I've put links to those in the description below, or you can head over to successstartswithin.com to learn more. Thank you for watching the video, and I wish you the best of success in all that you do.